Okay, welcome, and today I'm going to show you guys how to render tallow. So this is going to be Bera Basics number 3, since this isn't really producing anything edible. This is just going to be how to turn suet into beef tallow. So, well, beef tallow is a bit redundant since tallow's just rendered beef fat, kind of like lard is to pigs. So, in order to get tallow, you get suet first. Suet is this. It's this white, fatty hunk of just adipose tissue with some connective tissue. So, you might think that you get one of these, you take this whole thing and you throw it in to a cast iron and you put it in low and slow at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and you just come back after a while and it's melted all the fat, and you will get some tallow that way. It'll take forever for you to get tallow out of it, though, because this is a large hunk of tallow. This is about 2 pounds, this is another about 2 pounds of tallow. And there's connective tissue on this. So what you end up doing, if you want to render out tallow and you don't want it to be a week-long process of pouring off tallow, this will still be long because this is a lot of suet that I have today to process down. But you start by taking a good sharp knife and chunking up your suet. So I'm just starting by slicing down straight so I get these just nice meaty chunks of suet. And as I said, it's just a hell of a lot of fat, which means that it has a hell of a lot of flavor, but you don't eat tallow like this. You can, if you like making pastries, just kind of chunk this up, crumble it down, really mince it up, and use it in place of butter in pastries, or in place of lard in pastries. And that is absolutely amazing flavor. You get this really just earthy, good, fatty flavor from it. So that is something that is done fairly often. This one has a bit more connective tissue coating it. So you do want a fairly big knife when you're doing this, or a ridiculous slicer. I kind of went for both because I'm using my Chinese chef's knife, which is this massive hunking chopper, but it also has a very good edge on it. And it allows me to really just work through this suet fairly quick. So, start by slicing it up like this, then you'll go back and you can dice it. The smaller you make the pieces of tallow, or of suet rather, the faster the tallow can be rendered out of it. So this is really a bit of how much time do you want to spend slicing it versus how long do you want to be going back and forth, checking on it, pouring off tallow as it renders down. I normally go into decently sized chunks. That's far enough for me. I don't feel compelled to go much smaller than that. I could, and it would go faster, but this goes well enough like that. So I'm going to continue breaking this down, but the next step will be really easy because I have my oven preheating to 200 degrees. You want to do this at a low and slow temperature because you just want the fat, the tallow, to melt out of the suet. You don't want to start frying the suet or anything like that. You just want it to be warm so that this all melts and becomes this beautiful, beautiful cooking fat. So 200 degrees is really the happy area for this. It won't be anywhere near the smoke point of the tallow, so you won't end up spending your tallow as you render it. You'll be able to use it right after, and it'll be amazing. But it will take quite a bit of time, again, because I have a lot of suet here. So I'm probably going to be pouring off this tallow for a good while. I'll be adding all this into my large Dutch oven, which has enough space for all of this and then some. And just every few hours I'll come off and I'll pour off a fair bit of tallow and then stick it back in to continue rendering out. So I will join you guys after I get all of this chunked up and it's in the Dutch oven. I'll join you when I do my first pour off. That sound good? And I'll show you how you mix it round right before the pour off, how you filter it, and then how you just continue letting it render. And I'll do a third section where it'll be the end result, what it looks like after you've rendered out as much tallow as you possibly can. So I'll join you back in a few hours and then a good while after that. So here we are back after like 15 hours of this being in that 200 degree oven. You can render this quicker by turning the oven up to 300 degrees. I don't like that, or turning it up to as high as 300 degrees. I don't like that. I've always found that the more time that you give it to render out at a low temperature, the better the suet is, or the better the tallow that you get from the suet is. But you can, if you want it quicker, turn up the temperature by 50 to 100 degrees, and you'll still be fine, just your ending tallow won't be quite as good. You can see that the suet has really changed its appearance from that bright white fatty substance to it almost looks like jelly at the moment. So this is going to be the first harvesting of the tallow. So you can do a couple different ways. You can just pour it straight through a sieve into whatever container you're going to be using. And that works beautifully. Or you can do what I'm going to do, which is I'm going to be ladling out the tallow and putting it through the sieve into some good temperature resistant Pyrex, because this is still fresh from the oven. And the reason for the sieve is fairly obvious. There's chunks of suet in here, and that suet can give out a hell of a lot more tallow, so you don't want to pull all your suet out and then just discard it at this point, because I haven't even rendered out half the tallow that this will eventually yield. And like I said, because I'm doing so much suet in one go, this does take longer than if you're doing a smaller batch, because just like everything, the more there is to heat, the longer it takes to heat. And I had at least like 5-6 pounds of suet in here. So this takes a good amount of time. But the tallow is well worth it. It gives this amazing unctuous, fatty, beefy flavor to anything cooked in it. Because fat is flavor, and beef tallow is just beef fat. It is beef fat that has been rendered out, so it gives an amazing bit of flavor. And this just smells like I've been cooking beef all day in here. You get that amazing smell. So, this, I'm just going to be continuing to ladle out a portion, letting it drip down in, and then returning the suet back to my cast iron to ladle out more of this tallow. So this will take a while. I don't think you guys need to see this process happen at least a score more times. So I think this is a good point to cut out, and I'll again show you when the final harvesting is done. Because like I said, this suet still has a hell of a lot more tallow that it's going to give up for me. So this is going to continue going for at least another 15 hours, if not longer. So I'll join you guys back up once this is all done. And I'll show you what the suet looks like when all of the tallow has been given up. And then I'll explain how to get rid of what remains of the suet. Because you don't just toss it out normal. It's still going to be hot. You could let it cool down and then toss it out normal. But I'll get to that when I show you the final result. So see you then. Okay, so here we are again. This is what the suet looks like when it is completely spent. And I definitely wrung every drop of tallow out of this that I possibly could, because this is about 3 days after I started this, plus or minus a few hours. But yeah, I've really just taken this low and slow throughout, and I've been able to render out over about 2 1-pound loaf pans completely full of tallow from this suet. It has served its job. There are a number of different ways to get rid of this. You can still use it to a certain degree in certain types of pastry, though it's borderline spent for that as well. But there's also some other uses. It's rather nice fried consistency that can work in certain things, but for the most part, this is spent. This is entirely spent, so it's time to get rid of it. When it comes to this, because it is fairly fatty, or it's not all that fatty now, but because it's still a bit fatty, it's just fat that I can't really extract anymore. This definitely can't go down a garbage disposal. That would be horrendous. And it would kind of suck if you just throw this in your garbage can without anything else. So the way that I tend to get rid of this is the same way that I get rid of excess oil. And that is using a instant tea or instant coffee container that has been emptied out. There's a bunch of other containers. Anything that is a foil-lined, foil bottom or metal bottom container will work beautifully for this. And all you do is you scoop it out and into this container. Like I said, this is what it looks like when it's fully extracted. It isn't quite showing up how darkly golden brown this is. in my current lighting and for my camera, but this is here, let me see if I can actually tick this. Will that get it to snap a bit darker? Maybe a little bit. But it is a fairly dark golden brown. And as this was on, it starts to be drastically falling yields from it. So in the first block of time, let's say first 4 to 6 hours, you receive a good amount of tallow out of it. Or at least once the suet is starting to turn translucent and away from that just solid white, you start getting a good amount of tallow out of it. As it goes from that point, though, you get less and less tallow as time goes on. The quality of the tallow that you get stays nice and high throughout the entire process. It just takes longer for each additional unit of tallow out of your suet. So you can decide how long you take it. I tend to really milk it to the absolute end if I possibly can. Like I said, this is about 3 days after putting in 6+ pounds of tallow into my cast iron and just taking it really low and slow at 200 degrees. And I got a lot of tallow out of this. You can do it between 200 and 300 without any issue, and you'll still get good quality tallow. If you go much above 300, the quality of tallow degrades, and really the lower and slower you take it, the better the quality of tallow that you get out of it. Because if you take it too high, it starts effectively being the first cook with that tallow. So, just so that everyone can see, I showed you when I had the draining or the scooping out, the harvesting of the tallow. But once it cools, it just becomes this kind of solid white block. And this is amazing. Use it to make pies and pastries and breads, and you can fry beef in it, as will be coming out in my deep fried steak video. That's where the other 1 pound loaf pan quantity of tallow went to. It went to that deep fried steak video, so do watch that. It is amazing, and just, oh god, the steaks that I got out of that were brilliant. So after it's all been moved over to this container, you just cap it, and then you can throw it in your garbage can, and it won't cause any issue. This just makes it neater and cleaner, and you don't have to worry about the suet still being too warm, and it's the best way of dealing with it. Just like when you're dealing with excess fat, use a tin like this, and you'll get rid of it without destroying your plumbing and without getting your garbage men to absolutely hate you. So with that, there's the end of the how to render tallow video. So I'll give my normal challenge, despite this not being a standard cooking video, of try something new. Have you cooked with tallow before? Try cooking beef with tallow. It is amazing. The flavor that you get out of it, it just ups the beefiness. But with that, enjoy your food, enjoy your life. Have a good one all.